In this video, we're going to be talking about this awesome audio production PC. Hi folks, I'm Mike and I hope you're well. In today's video, we're going to be discussing why and how I built this audio production PC. We're going to be talking about its performance, the parts I chose and why I chose them, and also how I put the whole thing together. And yes, I am going to address those colored lights and why I chose a case that I can put my hand inside. But if this is your first time here and you like this kind of content, all about home recording, DAWs, plugins, gear reviews, that kind of thing, then please do subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube so that you get to see my future videos. Now let's get stuck into this PC. Okay, so we're going to start off by talking about performance, and I'm going to give you a real world test, the kind of thing that you might do and you'll be pushing your PC fairly to the limit. Now I'm here using Windows 10 64-bit, I'm using Studio One Pro 4.5, and I'm recording at 48 kilohertz 24-bit, and I'll be recording this guitar over the top of a backing which I created in the last couple of days. Now that backing includes 55 channels of audio all in all, 9 buses, 14 virtual instruments, including 12 contact libraries, and a total of 64 audio plugins, all happening in real time as I record this guitar. Now, as if that wasn't enough, I have a second sound card attached to the system, and that will be recording the output from Studio One for this video. It'll also be recording this microphone, mixing it all together and creating the video. Now that video includes it capturing this screen that you can see at the moment, capturing my webcam and putting it all together, compositing it together and making a video file. So my computer's doing an awful lot more than just recording this guitar and playing that background. In total, it's recording 3 different sound sources, and of course one of them with real-time effects on it. So that's an awful lot to be happening. So let's see how it goes. I'm going to close the console view here and just keep an eye on the CPU monitor down in the bottom left corner here, and that'll go up a little bit in the second half of this piece of music. It lasts about 40 seconds or so, this piece of music, and you'll see it go up as more instruments come in. Let's go ahead and record this guitar. So I hope that gives you some idea of the performance. It's probably more than most of you are going to need most of the time. I rarely go up to this number of tracks, but even if you did have problems as you were running all of these virtual instruments, you could just convert them into WAV files and your performance would improve enormously after that. I dare say you could go well up over 100 tracks with this, no problem. So let's take a look at how I built this whole thing and which parts I used. So over the past couple of years, I've built around 40 PCs for various people, and I've got a bit of a sense of which parts are good quality and perform well. And if you were to go to my lounge at the weekend, you'd find my kids playing on my gaming PC, which may look a little familiar. I built a number of PCs using these Thermaltake Core P3 open cases, and I'd notice how very quiet they are. I'm not sure why, perhaps it's because of the lack of case fans or that the whole thing doesn't act like a guitar body and amplify everything, but it was because of this that I chose this case. And if you're concerned because you have small kids who may stick their hands in, this case can be mounted up on the wall. So this is the first thing that I put together using nothing but a cross-headed screwdriver. Now I'll be putting a link in the description to my full parts list, including this case, along with links to each item. Now to build a PC, you'll need a screwdriver at minimum, but some handy extra items include a magnetic dish for screwdrivers, screws, wire cutters and cable ties. It's also handy to have a monitor, a wired keyboard and a wired mouse. It's also very recommended to use an anti-static wrist strap, and if not, make sure you discharge yourself from static by touching a large metal object regularly, particularly before you touch sensitive parts like the memory or the graphics card. You have been warned. Next up, I installed the Corsair RM750 power supply. Now, you may think that it doesn't matter which power supply you use for audio production, but I urge you to think again. Not only does this have an 80+ gold efficiency rating, which means you save on power, but it also has low noise capacitors and transformers and has a custom fan designed for low noise operation. In fact, the fan only spins when it's absolutely needed, which means less noise when you're tracking and mixing. Up next was attaching the CPU to the motherboard, and I'm using the Intel i7-7700. Now this, along with some other parts at the time of filming, are being superseded by newer models, but if you follow the link in the description for the parts list, I'll also give some updated options there. So here is the CPU socket. Now yours has probably got a cover on it, but I've already taken mine off here. And all you need to do is look for this lever here, push it down, pull it out and lift it up. And that moves the cover up out of the way. Now that exposes your CPU socket, so you need to be really careful here not to damage any of the pins you can see. Now the CPU itself has a notch on one end like this and another notch down on the other side. Now all you have to do is line that up with the notches in the socket. You can see me point to them here, and then you just gently drop the CPU down on. Now sometimes you have an arrow on the corner which lines up with an arrow which is marked on the motherboard as well. Either way, that's how you get your orientation. You drop it down into the socket, and then you're ready to put the cover back on. You push it down under the screw, you push your lever back down, and then back to where it came from. It springs into action there, and that is your CPU in place. Next, I attached the ASRock B250 Gaming K4 motherboard. Now you don't need to have a gaming motherboard, and you certainly don't need a motherboard with lights. More on that later. But this motherboard happened to have a few things that I wanted regardless of all that gaming jazz. This included 4 slots for RAM, which gives more flexibility for upgrading. Many motherboards only have 2. It also has M2 slots for M2 SSD drives, which can be a little bit quicker than regular SSDs. It also has the ability to connect up to 3 monitors if you aren't using a graphics card, and uses some really high quality components. At this point, after attaching the spacers to the case, I screwed the motherboard to the spacers. Okay, I'm going to interrupt this video at this point because in real life I actually stuffed up. I should have attached the CPU cooler bracket to the back of the motherboard right now, because you can't really access the back of the motherboard later. I had to undo a few steps and kind of pretend to you guys that it never happened, but I guess now you know. So anyway, make sure that you don't be like Mike, that you attach the bracket now so that you don't have to undo those steps. Okay, we can resume the normal video now. Now, after I attached the main power cables from the power supply to the motherboard, I went about attaching the radiator which came with the CPU cooler. That CPU cooler being the NZXT Kraken X52. I'd used this CPU cooler in a few builds before, and I loved its quality and performance. Its pump also operates really quietly, and even if it didn't come with the light show, I promise it would still be my CPU cooler of choice. Now, before you attach the CPU cooler, you need to put a little pea-sized blob of thermal paste right in the middle of the CPU. Thermal paste acts as a thermal conductor between the CPU and the CPU cooler. You then go ahead and attach the CPU cooler using the fittings provided. And now for the most contentious part of the whole build, I'm sure. These are the Cooler Master RGB fans, which I've attached to the radiator instead of the NZXT fans which come with the radiator and CPU cooler. Now, these fans will not make your music sound lighter, and they will not make your music more colourful. They are completely useless in terms of making your music better at all. But I did happen to have a couple lying around, and I thought I'd chuck them on. In for a penny, in for a pound. Now, I will say in their defense that they are one of the cheaper parts of the whole build. So I screwed them on to the front of the radiator and forgot to film the process. Now to finish off the whole cooling system, I just attached the various cables. The next part I installed has no RGB lighting but makes a big difference to performance. I decided to put in two 16GB kits of RAM from Geil, totaling 32GB. This RAM has a speed of 2400 MHz, and although you can get faster RAM, this motherboard doesn't support it, and honestly the benefits are negligible. Now, the motherboard does support up to 64GB of RAM, but it's expensive. There's a notch in each stick so they can't be inserted incorrectly, and if you're using less than 4 sticks, do consult your motherboard manual as to which slots to use. Next came the storage. I used two 480GB M2 SSDs, one for the system and one to store things like large contact libraries. This makes them load much faster, and if you're cutting corners, don't cut this one, it makes a big difference. In addition, for me, I added a regular 240GB SSD, and this is just for my temporary video editing files, so if you're not doing that kind of thing, you won't need this drive. I also put in my old 2TB hard drive, and this is for files that I use infrequently, and if money was no object, this would be an SSD or two. Now I want you to stop for a moment to enjoy the pure quality of this digitally zoomed footage. Who doesn't enjoy a bit of grain, huh? This is me attaching the cables from the case front panel to the motherboard. Without these, we can't easily switch on the system, etc. So each of the cables is labelled, and your motherboard manual will tell you which pins to connect them to. Honestly, this is my least favourite task, but it does mean that I can switch the system on for the first time. So with all my cables connected, my CPU cooler, my RAM and storage installed, it was time to give it my first test run. And miraculously, it worked. Woo! So it was on to the final major part, the graphics card. Now this part is entirely optional and it's not needed for audio production. But if, like me, you do video editing, 3D graphics or play the odd game or two, then you may well want one. Now I went for a Gigabyte R9 390 with 8GB of video RAM. An important consideration for an audio PC in a studio is fan noise. This card has a semi-passive fan, meaning the fans only spin when required, and given that they're never required for audio production, this card gives a near silent experience with plenty of performance when you need it for other tasks. Finally, I was finishing off and I tidied up all the cables in the case. This is worth spending a little bit of time on. And then it was on to attaching the smoked glass panel, a precarious task by yourself, so worth getting help with. And it was now time to bask in my finished product. So I do hope this video has been of help to you. If you have any questions at all, and I'm sure you do, then please do ask in the comments down below and I'll do my best to help you out. If you like this video, then hit the like button. If you didn't like this video for any reason, then hit the dislike button twice. If you like this kind of content, then please do subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube so that you get to see my future videos. And talking about future videos, I will see you in the next one, and they'll be appearing here somewhere. Maybe you'd like to watch this one, or 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 this one.